Purdy Peacock, a Halloween to remember. Purdy Peacock lived on a beautiful farm with lots of trees, flowering bushes, and a wonderful garden. In the fall of the year it was time to harvest all of his vegetables from the garden and fruit from his trees. He would dig his potatoes, pick and freeze his sweet corn and green beans, hoping to have enough food stored for the winter. He would pick all of his red and yellow delicious apples and store them in what is called a root cellar. A root cellar is a place deep underground where root crops, such as carrots and potatoes, are stored. It is also where Purdy and his family store their apples for the long winter months. The root cellar does not get to freezing temperatures and allows for the garden and fruit crops to remain unharmed. Purdy and his family enjoyed eating his harvest from his garden and fruit trees all winter long. The fruit and vegetables were delicious to eat while they stared out of the window of their golden barn at the cold and harsh winter temperatures. They were so thankful for their bountiful harvest. Purdy and his family weren't the only ones preparing for the long, cold winter. The black and brown squirrels were running around the farm frantically collecting the black walnuts that fall to the ground. They always stopped to eat a few nuts and then store the rest for winter. It was always so much fun to watch the squirrels collect their walnuts. Fall was a very busy time of year on Purdy's farm. It was also the time when Peachicks began to look forward to Halloween. It was October, and the Peachicks were trying to decide what costume they should have. Should they pretend to be a rabbit or a mouse? Or maybe they should pretend to be a cat or an owl. It was so hard to decide. Whatever they decided, the thought of Halloween approaching kept the Peachicks busy while Purdy and his family and friends were busy at work on their farm. Halloween Day came on a Thursday that year, and the weather was not very nice. It rained and rained and rained and rained. The weather forecast was for rain all day long and all night too. But a little rain would not stop Purdy and his family and friends from enjoying taking the Peachicks trick-or-treating. They were all excited, and it was fun to watch the Peachicks prepare for their day of fun. It was mid-afternoon when the temperatures began to fall, getting colder and colder with each hour that passed. But there was no need to worry. It was fall, and it doesn't get really cold and freeze until late November or December. The Peachicks were all dressed in their costumes and ready to leave. All of a sudden, the lights started to flicker off and on. Purdy looked out of the window and noticed that the rain was starting to freeze, and the temperatures were near 32 degrees, the freezing point of water, or in this case, the rain. Then they heard a loud crash and noticed a tree limb had broken under the heavy weight of the rain and ice. It had fallen on a power line, and the tree limb was on fire. It was quite a sight to behold. There was a huge pop. The fire went out, and so did the lights. It was so dark, and Purdy and his family and Peachicks were frightened. Needless to say, Halloween was canceled. Power was out everywhere in his neighborhood. It was dark for as far as Purdy and his family could see. What made it worse is that the temperatures were not predicted to get cold enough to freeze. Obviously, the predictions were wrong. Purdy and his family huddled together in their golden barn and lit a few candles. It was getting colder and colder and colder, and Purdy did not have any source of heat to keep them all warm. Purdy was getting worried. They spoke with some of the neighbors, and they were all toasty and warm, and they either had a generator to power their furnace and a few lights, or they had a wood stove. One neighbor told Purdy that they were way too warm and had a wood stove in their basement. This did not make Purdy feel any better. In fact, it made Purdy nervous, and he started to worry about his Peachicks freezing to death. It started to snow, and the temperatures dipped well below zero. It was only supposed to rain for the day, and was certainly not supposed to get cold enough to freeze, let alone snow. The wind was howling, and all night long Purdy and his family heard the eerie cracking of the tree limbs falling to the ground. It was a long and scary night. With a Halloween night like that, who needs scary costumes? Purdy and his family had their own Halloween night full of frightening happenings and spooky sounds. It was the scariest Halloween they had ever experienced. The next day was November 1st, and it was snowy, windy, and their beautiful golden barn was getting very, very cold. They did not know what they were going to do to keep from freezing to death. It looked just terrible outside. There were tree limbs broken, and they had fallen all over Purdy's beautiful farm, and the ground was nothing but ice. All they saw was ice. Ice everywhere. They could not go outdoors because they would slip and fall. Besides, it was so cold, snowy, and windy, who would want to go outdoors in that kind of weather? Night, too, was very cold, and Purdy and his family huddled together to keep warm. It was so dark and cold, and they were certainly worried about what would happen to them. They would light the candles and keep the Peachicks occupied by playing a few games. That took everyone's mind off of this dangerously cold weather. Friday came and went, and they were shivering with cold. Or was it shivering with fright? At this point, who could tell? Purdy had been calling his father, who lived on a farm about 10 miles away. He was worried about him, but he was told he was just fine and he had power. His father had talked with a couple of friends about the situation. He told the friends that Purdy did not have any source of heat and they were getting very, very cold. On Saturday morning, the friends of Purdy's father came to the farm and brought a small kerosene heater. The roads were very icy, but they made the trip to Purdy's farm just to bring them a source of heat to keep them warm. Purdy and his family were so happy to see them, and Purdy was very thankful that they had made the trip in the cold and ice to help them in their time of need. Purdy thanked them over and over and over. Saturday night there was still no power or lights, but at least Purdy felt better knowing they had a small source of some heat. But it was not all that warm even with this small heater. The temperature inside was 40 degrees at its warmest. Purdy and his family continued to huddle together for heat, but it felt like a heat wave compared to the last 2 nights, and they were very thankful. There was still no power on Sunday, and Purdy and his family were trying to remain hopeful and positive that help would come soon and that the power would be restored. Another cold day turned into night, and again they lit a few candles for light, and again they played some games to keep their mind off their terrible experience and cold temperatures. It was about 10 o'clock Sunday night when Purdy saw lights outside. It was a power truck, and he saw lights far off into the distance where power had been restored. Purdy was so excited. Then Purdy watched the truck drive away. Purdy also saw his neighbor's lights come on. He was now feeling a sense of relief and could not wait until he could be warm again. Purdy turned on the light switch. Nothing happened. Purdy tried the light switch again. Again nothing happened. It was then he realized his power did not work. All of the neighbors had lights, but Purdy's farm did not. Purdy could see the power truck over a mile away driving down the road, and he was getting nervous. He yelled, "Come back! Come back!" Of course that did no good, since they were already gone. Purdy was disappointed. He did not want to spend another night in the dark and cold. Purdy made a telephone call to the power truck and told them that there was still no power on his farm. Luckily the truck came back and had to remove the tree limb that had fallen on the power line. All of the lights came on, and the furnace began working to heat his beautiful golden barn. "Yippee!" they all exclaimed. Purdy and his family celebrated. They were so glad their 4-day fall adventure was over. They thanked the friends who brought them a small source of heat to keep them alive. And they wrote a big thank you for the newspaper for the power truck that had to go out in the cold snow and ice to fix the power for everyone in the neighborhood. Purdy could not have been more thankful to those who helped his family in his time of need. Purdy could finally relax and fell asleep and dreamed about his most frightening Halloween ever, the Halloween ice storm.